Hey, before we get started, I want to talk about some bad actors in our industry. These actors are disguising themselves as financial advisors, and they're really just financial salespeople, and they're trying to sell annuities. Annuities are products generated by insurance companies, which are really good for the insurance company to sell, and it's really good for the advisor or salesperson to sell to you, but it's not that great for you. We have a white paper on our website, Buyer Beware, at the very bottom of the website. Put in your email, and we'll send it to you on why you should stay away from these annuities. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Wiser Wealth Management Roundtable. We believe the best financial advice should always be conflict-free. I'm your host, Casey Smith, guiding you to financial freedom. We're my co-hosts, Brad Lyons and Matthews Barnett. Hey, guys.
Hi, Casey. How's it going?
So this podcast, we're going to talk about how to become wealthy. And you might ask, why would we do such a podcast when we're a wealth management firm? We work with people who are already wealthy. But here's the thing. A lot of people don't get it. And it's not that hard, but there's just a lot of distractions. I think it's important to understand that wealth is hidden. So you can be rich, have good income, have a great lifestyle, but you may not be wealthy, right? And so I kind of want to build on that foundation today. Maybe this podcast isn't for you. Maybe you're already wealthy. I will say, though, that we have clients all over the spectrum, from just getting started in life and saving $500 a month to net worths of $30 million. And none of them think they're wealthy.
Well, right? Studies show, this is kind of interesting because nobody sets out saying, I want to do this to be wealthy. Being wealthy isn't necessarily the goal. It's a byproduct of good financial habits that people create over their lifetime, right? And which means that wealthy is really in the eyes of the beholder, as they say. And it's because what you just said, Casey, is that people may have millions of dollars of investable assets, but that doesn't mean they think of themselves as, quote, wealthy. They are, because they're able to live on the income that those assets can produce and create a lifestyle for themselves, which is really the goal I think that most people have. But just to become wealthy in and of itself is often a byproduct, again, of good financial habits throughout a lifetime.
So if this doesn't apply to you, this might be a good podcast to share and say, hey, listen to this. This might be a good foundation for you to help building or change your situation.
Right.
When we give financial advice to people, we could come on the podcast here and try to talk about extensive tax strategies. We could talk about, buy-sell agreements. There's a lot of different things that wealthy people in their businesses and how they're working. But the reality is that's very unique to those people. It's hard to give general financial advice in a podcast that covers your unique situation. That's why it's important to work with a financial advisor one-on-one. But
that's more preservation of wealth too. We're talking kind of how to get there.
That's true.
Blocking and tackling in order to get to that spot.
So this podcast is going to start with the basics, and we're kind of build up from there. So when we sit down with people who are coming in or say, look, I have a good income, but I'm not doing something right, I always start with number one. Number one is eliminating debt. We want to get rid of debt. All debt's bad debt. We would want to have a way to accelerate the payoff or get rid of it right away. Second thing is we'll make sure we have enough emergency reserves, because you can go and invest money, but if you lose your job and the market's down and you have this perfect storm, you don't need to be withdrawing from your 401k plan or your retirement plan or even your non-qualified money at that point. You need to have reserves built up. So eliminate debt, build reserves. After that, are we saving enough for retirement? So that's when we start getting creative and looking at different ways to save for your future self. And then the final thing, the most fun part is the opportunity fund. It's, I'd really like to have rental properties. I'd really like to have a beach property that I rent out, or a beach property or mountain property that is just my second home. And that's where the opportunity money comes in, and you're saving a little differently than how you'd save for retirement, but you're saving because you know you're going to have to withdraw when an opportunity comes up. And those are always fun to talk about, and helping people use those accounts to start achieving their dreams. Going back to the very beginning, eliminating debt. So Matthews, I come to you and I have $30,000 in high interest credit card debt. And I'm making in my household income is like $150,000 a year. What are the steps? How do I get rid of all this?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's a pretty common scenario. We wrote about it in a blog in April with Financial Literacy Month. Is a lot of Americans are out of debt right out of the gate, whether it be starting out with a bunch of student loan debt, and then obviously for other reasons because they don't have the emergency fund and other things built up, they start getting in that hole of high credit card debt. So this is a very common scenario. But kind of the first point of that would be, what's your spending or your budget? Where's that monthly cash flow actually going? You can set a goal, but if it's not attainable, it's not really worth even setting. So you really just need to make sure that you have some type of spending budget and goal set. And then we look at different ways to attack the debt. We're big believers in the Dave Ramsey approach of the snowball approach to that, where you're attacking the lowest balances first. To the highest balances. So really just looking at a way to get those small wins and start building those goals of paying down each individual debt.
We start with debt for a purpose, for a reason. That's that we start with working on debt and eliminating that and lowering that, with our, with income, because our net worth is reduced by the amount of debt we have. Now, when we're talking about creating wealth, if we're not reducing debt first, we're not really creating wealth. We're just creating a net positive investable assets on one side of the ledger and debt on the other side of the ledger. But by reducing your debt and ultimately eliminating it, we're creating net worth, which creates wealth at the same time. So it has a dual purpose.
A lot of times we get into this because we see cases where there are high medical costs and they put it on an Amex at 18%. I'm not sure why that happens, but
18 would be lucky. Since I'm closer to high 20s.
That's true. Yeah, you can negotiate with hospitals. I don't think I would. I'd rather negotiate with the hospital than have to negotiate with Amex, honestly. But a lot of times people go about their life thinking, I really want this, I deserve this, and I can afford the payment. And that's not how you build wealth. There are times in life you do things, maybe you take the payment, it's for joy, it's like, look, I have to do this because of X, Y, and Z, and I get that. But this podcast is about building wealth. So we have to deny ourselves at times in order to have a more secure future. In our society, we're not really good at that. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Profit First, and I think we'll have a business focused podcast just about this book. It's a great book, but a lot of it in running a business, I didn't realize it's a very high percentage. I want to say something like 90% of small businesses, the ones that even succeed after the first 5 years, they're running sale to sale. You're talking about living paycheck to paycheck. These companies are living sale to sale, meaning if they don't have that next sale, that all of a sudden the business owner is not going to be able to make the payments on the Tesla and on the 14,000 square foot house and the boat and the second home. And right. So, we're not just living paycheck to paycheck, but even wealthy business owners with $1 million in income, net income, are living paycheck to paycheck. That's not building wealth. That's not building security for themselves. And the author of the books even talked about that. He sold a couple of businesses early on in his life, and he bought fast cars with them. And the next thing you know, a couple of years later, he's dead broke. He has to start all over again. And he has a knack for building businesses, which is in his favor, but he was a terrible money manager. He didn't know how to manage that money himself. And
it's often two different skill sets to make money, we'll call it to earn money, to generate money, and to manage money is two different skill sets.
And now we're living in a new society now where everything is a subscription payment. My daughter's phone wasn't working because she was out of storage. All these videos and pictures she takes, there was no place to store them on the cloud anymore. And so here I am. I have to do a family plan for 2 terabytes of cloud space in order to get all my kids' phones to sync up. I have to pay $9.99 a month. And I don't consider myself a cheap person at all. I'm a person that I do need to watch my spending, because if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right, by golly. So I have to be careful. But now I'm paying $9.99 a month for storage on an iPhone. And it kind of irks me. It's like, man, I don't like subscription fees. Or I'll write the check, but I don't like that monthly payment. That monthly payment is what bothers me. But now we have Netflix, and we have Apple TV, we have Disney, we have Paramount has launched a new. So we become a payment society. Everyone, if you can afford the payment, you buy it. We have counseled young people who have $60,000 a year in income, driving cars that cost them $1,200 a month, and somehow that's okay. In their mind,
low interest rate.
They made it because they have the car. No, you just invested it in a depreciable asset, right? Our clients here who are the most successful drive up in fairly modest cars. Have you guys noticed that? Well, you probably haven't. You don't always notice what they drive up in, but I've noticed that they come in very modest cars. One of our largest clients many years ago, when we were a growing firm, wore overalls and drove up in a beat up Hyundai. But he had $3 million in his account.
It's actually I was talking about yesterday, the UGA grad writing the Millionaire Next Door. It's one of the anniversaries of that, and it goes to that same principle of it's that the millionaire next door that's living within their means and not trying to be flashy and keep up with the Joneses are usually those people that are able to build that wealth.
Dave, it goes back. They've created good financial habits over a lifetime of expenditures. Now, we all have the same expenditures. We have housing, we have food, we have utilities, we have emergencies that come up. So basically, we all have the same categorical expenditures, but it's utilizing the leftover dollars in such a way that you get some benefit other than an immediate consumption of those. And so, and it goes to something that you talked about, Casey, is that, to find dollars in order to actually save them, we have to look for them. We have to go into our monthly checkbook and see where those dollars went in order to understand better what our cash flow is, what it needs to be, and what it could be. Now, recognizing that whenever you're investing for the future, you're putting current consumption aside for future consumption at perhaps even a higher rate, should you be able to earn a higher rate of interest on that, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And that's the important thing, is assigning a purpose to every dollar that flows through your checkbook. Some dollars have a purpose for housing. Some dollars will have a purpose for food. Some dollars will be purpose for utilities, for education, for healthcare, etc. But in the end, you're looking for dollars that previously had no specific purpose other than current consumption. Dining out because you got home late from work and you didn't feel like cooking that night. So, but you look in through your checkbook, you see that you did that 14 times last month.
Dating yourself with a checkbook there.
That's okay.
Balancing a checkbook or looking in your expenses through your online banking is another way too.
I am what I am, Matthews. True. But the principle's the same. So scanning through your ledger on your app for your bank, and really, actually, you don't need to do it on an app. You need to print this stuff off. You go online, you download the statement, you print off the last 3 months, and you say you categorize.
Categorize it.
Exactly. I can't eliminate this. Nope. Or I could eliminate this, and that. So if you're in a situation now where you're just in dire straits and you need to get rid of this debt, you're going to have to literally live like no one else is living in order to live in the future like no one else is living. That's a Dave Ramsey
yes, it
quote.
Is.
But you're going to have to raise dollars. So how are you going to do that? First thing is you put the credit cards away. Forget about credit rating and all that stuff. You need to be at a point in your life where you don't need a credit rating. Credit ratings don't even matter. So the first thing you've got to do is raise cash. You're going to do that by going through a ledger and eliminating all expenses. Pay the minimum on all your debt payments until you get this figured out. Create a list of those debt payments from highest or from lowest to highest. And then anything extra you can apply to debt in any given month goes to the lowest balance. When you get that paid off, you're going to celebrate. You're going to go out somewhere, not too big of a celebration, but you're going to celebrate that, hey, that debt's paid off, and then you're going to move to the next debt and then to the next debt. You're going to stop saving in 401ks. You're going to stop putting money in your own savings account. You've got to go and eliminate debt. I tell people I have this rhinoceros picture in my office, a little tiny picture, very discreet above my door frame. And it comes from a silly book called Rhinoceros Like Success. I actually gave it to a young lady who passed through here in the last few months to encourage her that we can't take the shotgun approach to debt or anything in life, honestly. You've got to have focus. And a rhinoceros charges straight ahead at something. It doesn't run around like a crazy, dog or something. It just charges right at one thing and lowers its head. And that's what you have to do to be successful with the debt. Is you have to get mad about it. You have to say, I'm not going to live like this anymore. And you get out of the situation. After that debt is eliminated, except for maybe your mortgage and your possibly a car, which I don't think there should be car loans, but if there is a car loan, it needs to be a small one. And then after that, let's move on. We've got debt conquered. We don't need to spend any more time on debt. Now we have to figure out how much in savings we need to have. Savings typically is 3 to 6 months of expenses, not income. 3 to 6 months of your expenses. You just lowered your expenses. So, you don't have to have this overnight, but you're going to charge at trying to get rid of those, build up that savings. For retirees, typically we like to see $50,000 minimum in savings. So somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. I like to see in the portfolio 2 years worth of expenses. If you're withdrawing from the portfolio to live on, we'll have about 2 years of expenses set aside inside the portfolio as well. So now we can withstand market fallout. We can withstand any surprises that come along the way in retirement because we don't have a job in that scenario. But for people who are trying to build wealth, you need to have emergency reserves so you don't have to go and touch those precious savings.
Emergency reserves are also for a purpose. And once you reach your emergency reserve, you don't need to keep adding to it because your purpose, their objective, has been reached. And that being, in the event that worst case scenario, we lose a job, we have time to continue to look for a job while our expenses are being covered, right? So if you're married, you don't need it as long as 6 months. It may be that with the spouse's income, you're able to meet a certain portion of all those expenses. So it's something to be figured out. How long do you think it will take to replace your job? It's also for those intermittent expenses that could be healthcare, car breaking down, roof leaking, needing a new roof. There are these sorts of things that you don't have to go back to the credit card at high interest rates to pay off.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We get energized every week seeing more and more downloads, and we really enjoy sharing with you tips and techniques on how we do financial planning, our thoughts on markets and current events. If you'd like to see more, we also have started a YouTube channel under Wiser Wealth Management. On this channel, we have a 5 and 20 every week where we talk about 5 topics over a 20-minute period. I also repost our podcast there as well as our weekly blogs. You can go to that channel, Wiser Wealth Management. Be sure to subscribe. Also, if you have a moment, however you're listening to this podcast, give us a like. Thanks. Okay, so we have debt eliminated. We're not making other people rich by paying 25% in credit cards, right? Or 9 or 8 or 5. Now we're moving into, we have savings built up. Your savings, by the way, is going to have almost zero interest. It's not going to make any money. It's not supposed to. for exactly the same reason Brad just said. If you lose a job and you really want this type of job, and which is better for you, better for your family, but it takes probably 6 months to acquire it, that rate of return on that savings is huge because you didn't have to take the next job that came up. You took the job that you could wait for. And so the rate of return is very, very high at that point. So you keep that in mind. The best I've seen online right now has been 0.5%, which is not going to keep up with inflation. But emergency savings is not supposed to keep up with anything other than keeping up with your emergencies. Right?
That's right.
Then after this, we start focusing. We're kind of out of the woods now. The airplane's not crashing anymore. So now we're flying, not flying high, but we should be gaining ground or gaining altitude. So in this scenario, the next thing we want to do is start saving for retirement. And honestly, I like a very simple budget system called pay yourself first. Right? If you always going to save, depending on your age, let's say 10 to 15% of what you are earning, and it goes into an account before you get paid, that's paying yourself first, right? You stay out of debt, you keep your emergency savings built up, you really shouldn't get in that much trouble, and you can start building wealth that way.
Well, that's the whole point of these 401k companies started doing auto enrollment, auto escalation each year is to make people invest, and so they forget about it, whether they were really trying to invest or not. It made them go in and select that they didn't want to in order to do it. So they're trying to establish those principles now early on, right, when people enroll in 401ks and auto enrollment.
So what happens when we invest? That becomes the question. We tell people you need to invest. You need to invest. You invest for the future. But what happens when we invest is that hopefully through compounding interest, we can have a rate of return that is sufficient that will create wealth for ourselves at some point in time that we can turn around and use that wealth to pay ourselves income. Compounding wealth has been called the eighth wonder of the world, and it literally is. I did some very simple calculations here, Casey, I'd like to share. If a 25-year-old person began saving $100 a month and continued to save for 40 years and retired at age 65, and all they did was save $100 a month from their income that month and got a S&P 500 historical return. They didn't try and, speculate on any investments. They just said, I'm going to work till 65. I'm going to save $100 a month. What can I expect? What S&P 500 historical rates? They could expect to be a millionaire at $100 a month. $100 a month for 40 years for a 25-year-old person at age 65 would have $981,973 at a simple market rate of return if they had invested in the past 40 years, which means they started in early 80s, 1980, 1981. They retired today in 2021, they'd have close to $1 million if they'd have done nothing else but that. So compounding interest, again, the eighth wonder of the world.
I guess another angle to that too is you got to realize that $1 million at their age is going to be not worth that much compared to inflation.
The longer you wait, the harder. The rest of that stat I've seen is you wait till 35 and you contribute to 65. I mean, you've had to contribute way more money and you still end up getting less money just because of the fact those 10 years from 25 to 35 make a huge difference on compounding.
But that's a very good point, Brad. And I like it. I will add that to build wealth, like we're talking about wealth, you probably don't need to just be putting in 10% of what you make. You need to figure out how to be putting in the maximum. The maximum in the 401k is $19,500 a year. After you're over the age of 50, you can put in $26,000. But if we meet a lot of young people that are making really good incomes these days, and I would argue that maxing out 19.5 and then probably doing something outside that in a separate account.
Well, by looking at something as simple as $100 a month, okay, you can see how the tremendous value it has for putting it away. If you wanted $2 million, you do $200 a month. You want $3 million, you do
Exactly.
$300 a month, et cetera, until you get up to the $19,500. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, it's just math. What that would be? I just take, it'd be $19 million essentially.
Yeah.
So it's utilizing the principle of compounding interest over long periods of years. Matthews had made the great example. If this person had waited to age 35 and began saving, they wouldn't have anywhere near the same amount of money because of compounding interest. So it's been shown that it can take more than twice as much, 3 times as much, 4 times as much for starting at age 35. So can you imagine starting at age 45, starting at age 55, how much we would have to save in order to achieve some sort of goal for wealth?
It's hard to do that. You walk out of college and that's not what's on your mind.
No, it's not.
And it's a shame.
And basic cost of living takes up so much of, a percentage of our incomes then.
But I think the important thing there is the habit. Even if it's $1, even if it's $3,
right. If it was $10, you'd have $100,000 a year.
The more money you make, that percentage, that amount keeps going up. Though that's the thing you got to realize is you just establish those behaviors, and when you start getting raises and bonuses and start making more money, that doesn't mean you need to spend more money or live a more lavish lifestyle. It means you still need to maintain those certain percentages and put it away.
That's right. Yep. And that's very important. If you do the pay yourself first method, there is a certain percentage of your income that you need to be putting away. So if a young person, they put away 10%, that's more than enough. Older person may do 15, you might do 20, you might do 30 if you're older, which sometimes is actually easier to do if the kids have left and you don't have any more college bills and you're making more than you did when you were in your 20s. That's probably easier to tackle that nut, but that's very last minute. So yeah, if you just say, okay, I want to start saving 10%, that's the cool thing about financial planning is that you can forecast all this out. Say, I'm going to do 10%. What does it get me? And say, oh, okay. Well, adjusted for inflation. Yeah, that's a good track to be on. So once you know that you're on this track for retirement, then the next thing is saving money outside that for opportunities. And to me, that's the most fun part about investing is the money that you don't have to put away, but you put extra away. That could be done. We have a program here called Flight Path that a lot of our hourly clients will use to put away money. It's a low cost investing way of creating an opportunity fund. It's all run through an app. It's managed on the Betterment platform. But Flight Path, that's what I use. If I have extra money each month, I put it into my Flight Path account so that the money can grow into the future for an opportunity that might arise. But you don't have to do that. You could do a Vanguard S&P 500 fund. You could do a mixture of S&P 500 and a bond fund. Probably not cash. That's probably not the best place to put it unless you're saving for a purchase that you're going to have in the next couple of years. But there's a lot of different things. I hate to advertise digital currency, but that seems to be the cool thing to invest in. Possibly individual stocks if you really want to take that risk in doing that. But the opportunity fund, that's where you get to be creative and come up with other ideas. Maybe it's reinvesting in your business. So there's a lot of different ways to create that wealth going forward to the point where you have excess. And I think that's the hardest for most people is to get that excess because it can disappear really, really fast if you're not a natural saver.
I think that probably one of the most common ones we see, though, is about the opportunity funds, probably rental properties, whether it be a beach property they might want to live in or rent out, just having an additional property once their primary home's been paid off.
Yep. Some people want to do that as their primary means of retirement. I struggle with that a little bit. You got to have a lot of properties to make that worthwhile. And you think about all the expenses, the HVAC units, the roofs, the repairs. In our area right now, it's very hard to find rentals. Maybe flips possibly, but I think good rentals like $80,000, $90,000, $110,000 homes. Where are those? I don't know where they are. Someone told me that one time, and I looked like recently, and for whatever reason, Columbus, Georgia had a lot of $80,000 houses, but within an hour of here, there wasn't really anything that you would purchase and be able to rent out. I don't think.
Not 38 and Rosemary and some of those other places on the beach. Definitely not getting anything closer, probably to $1 million.
No, rental income is really no different than investment income, and it's thought that if somebody's going to have rental income, they need to diversify that income across several properties, because at any one point in time, to your point, Casey, HVAC goes out, you have a roof that needs fixing, you have renters who take off on you and it remains unrented, and if it is the only one you have, you're all of a sudden in a losing situation. Whereas if you have multiple properties, you have income streams from each one to offset one another when one may be out of income.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have a podcast someday on building a real estate portfolio for yourself.
Yeah, I don't want us to sound like that we're negative on doing that.
But there's a way to go about doing it where you mitigate the risks involved, just like in stock investing.
Yeah. Well, even during COVID, if you had a rental property and someone couldn't pay their rent, you couldn't kick them out.
Right. Yeah.
And the government kind of looked at it as, well, that's your problem. So that would have derailed an income stream for sure.
Not just an income stream. We're talking about after you're on track for retirement to build that additional wealth, and you want to make sure this doesn't derail your retirement that you built up too, because you're kind of got a little aggressive with what you've been buying.
I'm still a big fan of having second, third properties that you might visit yourself, but then you also rent it out. One, because those people have a lot less rights. Someone doesn't leave your beach house or your mountain house, you call the cops, right? Where if it's a rental agreement and they're just in there, then there's not much you can do right now. Now I think after September of this year, that should loosen up if they don't extend everything. Okay, so we've kind of gone through the 4 pillars, buckets, whatever you want to call them, check boxes of how to start building wealth. The most important thing, or the concept of it, is stop making payments and making other people wealthy. You need to do things. You need to make money moves that put income in your pocket. Would that be dividends? Would that be rental income? Whether that be loans or whatever it is that you can do to generate income, you need to be the person receiving the payment, not the person making the payment. And that could be a mindset shift. I think we get it appears to be statistically, from what I'm reading, is cars and large homes, status symbols, makes us feel good, makes us look important, but in the end, that's not what true wealth is. Those are mostly cars, boats, airplanes. Those are depreciable assets. And it's okay to have fun. It's okay to do things you want to do and have joy in life. But you shouldn't be doing that while getting the bank wealthy at the same time. Delayed gratification, right?
Yeah, and it's not so much that if we see somebody driving a brand new Tesla and living in a big house, they say, "Oh, they're rich." Well, they may have a high income, but they may also have very high expenses every month, and that differential being their net worth may not be wealthy. Mm-hmm. So those people kind of come and go, and you see them come and you see them go from time to time, but they're not creating real wealth for themselves and their family.
You see their cars in their house, but you don't see their net worth statements.
That's right.
That's why the wealth is hidden.
That's right.
That's right. It's the millionaire next door, to your point, Matthews.
Right. All right, guys. Well, that was a good conversation. Hopefully, people listening can take a little bit from that or pass it on to someone that you think might be needing such advice. So you can see we got, is this our last? Well, we got a couple more in May to educate people. So I think this is a great podcast on educating people about money. And we'll see you guys next time.
Sounds great.
Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.